Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video and leaving such heartfelt comments. Wishing the whole family good health and peace. CEO James, busy as ever, started his day at 9 a.m. He sat down at his desk, looked at the wall clock, and realized it was time to begin work. While enjoying a cup of tea, James carefully reviewed reports and tasks that needed to be completed. He picked up his phone and called Tuan, asking him to find a lawyer to prepare for an important meeting in the afternoon. After the conversation, Tuan unexpectedly reminded James about Valentine's Day. James suddenly realized that in the past few days, he had been so busy with work that he hadn't spent any time with Diep. A wave of regret washed over him, and he decided to do something special for her. James quickly left the office and drove to a nearby flower shop. On the way, his car passed through bustling streets and crowded shops. The flower shop's front appeared before him, with stalls full of colorful flowers in full bloom. He stepped inside, choosing a vibrant red rose bouquet and a heart-shaped gift box. Inside the box were plump, red strawberries and stunning roses, which made him feel happy. The Valentine's gift was ready. James carefully placed it on the seat of the car and drove back to the office. In his heart, he thought to himself that Diep would surely be very happy to receive this gift. On the way back, James's car passed through fields of wildflowers, with tiny blossoms in full bloom, serving as a reminder that in this busy life, love and beautiful gifts can always bring unexpected joy. This morning, when the first rays of sunlight gently pierced through the thin clouds, Diep was already present on the pumpkin field. The surrounding landscape was eerily quiet. Only the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant hum of insects could be heard. The pumpkin field was vast and stretched endlessly toward the horizon, a sight that Diep's eyes could not quite reach. The pumpkin rows were neatly planted, forming a beautiful, bountiful image of nature. Diep carried a large basket on her back, holding a small sharp knife to cut the pumpkins when they reached the right size. She carefully walked through each row of pumpkins, her eyes scanning the area for the biggest pumpkins to harvest. The field was expansive and Diep moved from one row to the next. Some rows had small pumpkins, while others had large, ripe ones. The scent of damp soil mixed with the sweet fragrance of ripe pumpkins lingered in the air. The field was lush with vibrant green leaves and strong, healthy pumpkin vines. Each pumpkin lay silently on the ground, some wrapped in green leaves as if nature itself was protecting them, while others sat alone, showing their strength and freedom. Diep stepped gently through the rows, her hands skillfully cutting the pumpkins. She had been doing this since she was a child, following her mother to the fields and learning how to take care of the pumpkin plants. Diep loved this work, not just because it provided for her family, but because it allowed her to feel connected to nature. Every morning when she stepped onto the field, she felt like she was part of the land, part of the life surrounding her. That feeling was priceless, like a sense of peace and contentment within her soul. Diep walked from one row to the next, her feet leaving imprints on the soil. The field seemed to stretch even further, endless and vast. Some rows of pumpkins were just beginning to bear fruit, with tiny pumpkins, still too small to be harvested, while others had already produced large, round pumpkins that were ready to be picked. These pumpkins were now the fruits of months of careful tending and attention, and Diep was here to gather them. She crouched down, gently picking a small pumpkin, feeling the smoothness of its skin in her hands. She carefully placed it in her basket and continued on to the next set of pumpkins. As she worked, the sound of birds chirping nearby created a cheerful atmosphere. Each time Diep harvested a pumpkin, she felt like she was contributing to the earth, to the growing season. She cherished these moments, the feeling of working hard and seeing the results. At times, Diep paused to take in a deep breath, relishing the fresh air of the field and the serene environment. This field wasn't just a place where she worked. It was where she found peace within herself. Whenever she felt tired or burdened, standing amidst the pumpkins and looking at the lush green rows always made her feel at ease. Diep had passed several rows of large pumpkins and was now moving on to the smaller, younger plants. Each row had different characteristics, with pumpkins of various sizes and shapes. Some pumpkins were small like eggs, while others were as large as a basketball. These smaller pumpkins might ripen in the next few days, or might need a few more weeks before they were ready to harvest. Diep reached down to pick another pumpkin from the earth, its orange skin deepening with the signs of ripeness. She smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction as she saw the fruits of her labor growing strong and healthy. She was proud of what she had accomplished over the past few months, and she knew that her hard work was paying off. The field was vast, but to Diep it was a familiar and comforting place. She had grown up here walking these rows with her mother, learning how to care for the pumpkin plants. Each time she saw the pumpkins growing, ripening under her care, she felt a profound sense of joy and pride. And so, Diep continued her work, moving from row to row, harvesting the pumpkins. The field before her was alive with the energy of growth, and she was an integral part of that. Each pumpkin she picked was like a piece of the earth, nurtured and loved by her, ready to become something wonderful to be shared with those who needed it. As James drove closer to Diep's house, he noticed the peaceful morning atmosphere. The surrounding houses were quiet, everyone busy with their own work. James parked his car, stepped out, and walked inside. However, when he entered, he realized that Diep wasn't at home. A sense of disappointment washed over him. Instead, only Diep's loyal dog, Hockey, ran out to greet him. Hockey wagged its tail happily, as if it knew that James had arrived. James bent down, petted Hockey, and asked, "Hey Hockey, where's Diep? Is she at work?" Hockey wagged its tail even faster, jumping up joyfully, as if agreeing with his question. James smiled, patted Hockey again, and then took out his phone. He called Diep, hoping she would answer. "Diep, where are you?" James asked when the call connected. Diep's voice came through the other end, gentle yet busy. "Today, I'm harvesting pumpkins at the field." Hearing this, James felt a slight concern but kept his tone calm. "Have you watered the vegetables yet? What about your little vegetable garden?" Diep sighed softly and replied, "Not yet, James. I've been busy with the pumpkins today, so I didn't get to water the garden. I'll do it once I get back." James thought for a moment and then said, "Well, I'll water the vegetables for you. You can just focus on the work outside." Diep was a little surprised but felt touched by his kindness. "Thank you, James. You're always so thoughtful." After the conversation, James felt happy knowing he could help Diep. He wanted to make a special surprise for her today. James went out to the garden, where Diep had planted some new rows of vegetables. The air was filled with the scent of soil and plants. He gently took the watering can and began his task. The vegetable rows, lush and green, seemed to welcome his care, as if they too could feel the love James had for Diep. He watered the vegetables, feeling like everything in the garden was becoming more alive with every drop of water. It was as if these plants were growing under the care of both Diep and James, day by day. After finishing the watering, James went inside and noticed the chickens also needed water. He went to their coop and filled their drinking troughs. It felt like he was completing an important task, not just for Diep, but for the love he had for everything she cherished. Once the chickens were taken care of, James noticed that the front yard was littered with fallen leaves. An idea came to him. He went inside to grab a broom and began sweeping up the leaves. This simple task seemed to calm him. As he swept, he thought about Diep and the little things he could do to make her happy. When the yard was clean, James moved to the patio and arranged the furniture neatly. After finishing everything, he placed the bouquet of red roses and the gift box on the table. He smiled as he looked at his thoughtful gift, silently saying to himself, "Diep will be so happy when she sees these." After the conversation, James felt happy knowing he could help Diep. He wanted to make a special surprise for her today. James went out to the garden, where Diep had planted some new rows of vegetables. The air was filled with the scent of soil and plants. He gently took the watering can and began his task. The vegetable rows, lush and green, seemed to welcome his care, as if they too could feel the love James had for Diep. He watered the vegetables, feeling like everything in the garden was becoming more alive with every drop of water. It was as if these plants were growing under the care of both Diep and James, day by day. After finishing the watering, James went inside and noticed the chickens also needed water. He went to their coop and filled their drinking troughs. It felt like he was completing an important task, not just for Diep, but for the love he had for everything she cherished. Once the chickens were taken care of, James noticed that the front yard was littered with fallen leaves. An idea came to him. He went inside to grab a broom and began sweeping up the leaves. This simple task seemed to calm him. As he swept, he thought about Diep and the little things he could do to make her happy. When the yard was clean, James moved to the patio and arranged the furniture neatly. After finishing everything, he placed the bouquet of red roses and the gift box on the table. He smiled as he looked at his thoughtful gift, silently saying to himself, "Diep will be so happy when she sees these." Once everything was done, James felt a sense of satisfaction. He sat down for a moment, took out some paper and a pen, and decided to write a letter to Diep. He wrote with sincerity and love. "To Diep, my love, I'm sorry that I haven't been able to spend much time with you lately. I hope you have a wonderful and joyful Valentine's Day. I'm always thinking of you, and I hope you feel my care in every small action I've taken. Wishing you a day full of happiness." After finishing the letter, James felt more at ease. He stood up, went to the door, said goodbye to Hockey, and stepped out of Diep's house. His heart was beating faster as he walked away, knowing that today wasn't just any ordinary day, but a special one that Diep would never forget. After harvesting a full basket of pumpkins, Diep took them to the center of town to sell. She didn't have a scale, so she went to a convenience store to rent one, and asked for permission to sit next to their shop to sell the fresh pumpkins. She continuously invited people to buy the pumpkins, saying how fresh and delicious they were. Many people came to buy from her, chatting as they purchased the pumpkins. Diep noticed a familiar older man, who also bought pumpkins from her. He advised her not to get involved with James, saying that James was not as good as she thought. Then the man left and Diep felt a bit worried. At the same time, a singer with a guitar named Min was in the neighborhood, sitting in the convenience store drinking water. He observed every movement Diep made with affectionate eyes. Before long, Diep had sold all of her pumpkins and was getting ready to leave. Seeing this, the singer immediately followed her back home. In the afternoon, Tuan brought lawyer Ha as scheduled to meet with James. They shook hands and began discussing the case. James invited him inside the house so they could talk more comfortably. After pouring a cup of water for lawyer Ha, James started explaining the situation. He said his company was entangled in a phantom hydropower project. They were facing issues with a partner named John, who suddenly withdrew his investment and persuaded other investors to do the same, which caused major difficulties for James' company. The lawyer replied that the documents James had provided were still not enough to file a lawsuit against John. James sent additional documents, including contracts, for the lawyer to review. The lawyer then asked, "If we win this lawsuit, how much will I receive?" James replied, "If we win, I will send you 200 million VND. I also want to add that I'm not pursuing this case for myself, but to help the farmers in this area." The lawyer, feeling empathy for him, said, "I will take on this case, and only if we succeed will I accept any payment from you." Diep continued to sell her pumpkins, her voice filled with warmth as she greeted each passerby. The small crowd that had gathered around her seemed to enjoy chatting with one another while purchasing the fresh produce. She smiled as she handed out each pumpkin, her thoughts briefly drifting to the advice from the older man, but she shook it off, focusing on the task at hand. The day passed quickly as she continued to interact with the locals, all the while feeling a bit of pride in what she had grown and brought to market. As she was wrapping up and preparing to leave, she noticed a figure sitting in the corner of the convenience store. It was Min, the young singer with the guitar, someone she had seen before in the neighborhood. He was sipping on his drink, but his gaze was firmly fixed on her. His eyes seemed kind, and there was a quiet admiration in them as he watched her interact with the customers. He was struck by the way she spoke to everyone, so warmly with such a genuine spirit. Before she knew it, Diep had sold all of her pumpkins. She started to gather her things, preparing to head home, but as she was walking away, she noticed Min standing up and following her. She didn't notice immediately, but as she reached her house, she caught a glimpse of him walking behind her. His presence felt strange, but not in an uncomfortable way. Min didn't approach her, only followed her from a distance, with his eyes lingering on her every movement. In the afternoon, Tuan arrived with lawyer Ha as arranged, and the two of them met with James. They greeted each other with a handshake, and then immediately began discussing the case. James invited the lawyer into his home, wanting to talk more comfortably. He poured a cup of water for lawyer Ha, offering him a seat as he began explaining the situation. James explained that his company was facing serious problems with a project, a phantom hydropower project. He told the lawyer about the difficulties with a business partner, John, who had suddenly pulled out his investment and managed to convince other investors to do the same. This move had created a lot of obstacles for his company, leaving James struggling to keep things afloat. Lawyer Ha listened carefully and examined the documents James had provided. The lawyer, after reviewing the documents, said, "The paperwork you've given me is still insufficient to pursue a lawsuit against John. We need more detailed contracts and additional paperwork to move forward." James, feeling a sense of urgency, quickly provided the additional documents about the contract. He trusted lawyer Ha's expertise and wanted to make sure they had everything they needed to proceed. Then lawyer Ha asked, "If we win this case, how much would I be entitled to?" James paused for a moment, considering the question. "If we win, I will send you 200 million VND. But I want to clarify that I'm not pursuing this case for personal gain. My main goal is to help the farmers in this area who are suffering because of this situation." Lawyer Ha nodded. visibly moved by James' words. "I understand, James. I will take on this case and I will only accept the payment if we succeed. I believe in the cause, and I want to help you see this through." After a long day of selling pumpkins, Diep returned home and was surprised to find a bouquet of roses and a gift box on her table. She smiled as she picked up the flowers, feeling a mix of joy and curiosity. As she admired them, Min, the singer who had followed her home, appeared at the door. He greeted her and teased that he could have gotten her a bigger bouquet. Diep politely declined, mentioning that they had just met. Min asked if the flowers were from her boyfriend, James, and Diep confirmed, explaining that James was a businessman. Min shared that while he had a family business, his true passion was music. He then left, but before walking away, he made a comment about his new passion being a girl, referring to her. As he walked off, he called his brother, deciding to return home to manage the family business, choosing responsibility over his music career. Min was conflicted after his conversation with Diep. Music had always been his dream, but now, his feelings for Diep made him reconsider his priorities. He called his brother to tell him he was coming back to manage the family business, leaving his music career behind. His brother was surprised but supportive, reminding him not to forget his own dreams. Min was determined that, for now, his passion would be for Diep. Meanwhile, at James's company, workers who had been laid off due to the struggling hydropower project gathered outside his office in protest. They were angry, demanding work and answers. When James arrived, he approached the crowd and reassured them that he was doing everything he could to resolve the situation. Though they weren't completely satisfied, James's calm response helped defuse the tension, and the workers began to disperse, knowing he was actively addressing their concerns.
Tập quán ăn uống, người dân vùng núi thường có những món ăn truyền thống như cơm lam, cơm nếp, xôi lết, thịt nướng. Tập quán ở người dân vùng núi thường sống ở trong những ngôi nhà truyền thống như nhà sàn của người Tày, nhà rông của người Mông. Những phong tục tập quán này đã được bảo tồn và phát triển qua nhiều thế hệ, tạo nên bản sắc văn hóa đa dạng và phong tục phong phú của các dân tộc người thiểu số ở vùng núi. Dân tộc thiểu số là những nhóm dân tộc có một số lượng rất là ít so với dân tộc đa số trong một số quốc gia và vùng lãnh thổ. Tại Việt Nam có 54 dân tộc thiểu số, chiếm khoảng 15% tổng dân số của Việt Nam. Một số dân tộc thiểu số tại Việt Nam bao gồm như người Tày, sinh sống chủ yếu tại các tỉnh phía Bắc, Lạng Sơn, Cao Bằng, Bắc Kạn. Người Thái sinh sống chủ yếu ở các tỉnh phía Bắc như Sơn La, Điện Biên, Lai Châu. Người Mông sinh sống chủ yếu tại các tỉnh phía Tây Bắc như Hà Giang, Lào Cai, Yên Bái.